Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for this AGA Live drawing demo with Halie Finney. My name is Liz Hill. I'm the Programming and Engagement Coordinator here at the AGA, and I'm excited to be here today with artist Halie Finney and AGA Curator Lindsey Sharman. Halie Finney's newest installation, The Ghost of the Mink Make Makes a Big Spirit, is presented by Capital Power and can be seen in Manning Hall at the AGA. And today, Lindsey and Halie will be talking a bit about that installation, and also Halie will be demoing for us some drawings. So quickly before I turn it over to Lindsey and Halie, I just want to cover some housekeeping about this webinar platform. If you have any issue with your connection, there's a little red reconnect button at the top of your screen, and you can just hit that and it should refresh. It may or may not help, but it is at least something that can help if you're having some trouble connecting. On the right-hand side, you'll also see a chat box, so you can enter any comments or questions there. We probably won't be responding to questions during the demo, but at the end, we can wrap up with a few questions. And without more ado, I'll turn it over to Lindsey and Halie.
Thanks, Liz. So I'm Lindsey Sharman, the curator here at the AGA. I'm very happy to be here with Halie today. We are in the same building, but far on different ends of the building. So we are both actually at the AGA. I'm very excited to have Halie showing us how to draw today. So Halie is an emerging Métis artist currently based in Edmonton, Alberta. She received her degree from AU Arts in 2017, where she majored in drawing. Also graduated from MacEwan University in 2014 with a diploma in fine arts. She was born and raised in Lesser Slave Lake region of Alberta. Halie creates a mythology of characters who live in a simplified storybook version of her hometown. The band of characters plays out non-linear idiosyncratic narratives that are expressed through animations, costumes, drawings, paintings, performances, and other objects. Halie also practices tattooing and is the latest member of the MacEwan collective. Congratulations.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, Halie and I are here together at the Art Gallery of Alberta, which is located in Edmonton on Treaty 6. Territory. This is the the traditional land of diverse Indigenous peoples, including Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe. So to help situate us here and to help with this land acknowledgement, the first drawing that Halie is going to do and share with us is she's going to draw Treaty 6. So it's a sort of like a callback to elementary school where we learned how to draw all of the provinces.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way when I was practicing. So I guess to start, whenever I start drawing, I start with this little, part of Treaty 6, I start with this little nub that comes up. And then I kind of go down and it makes this is also not extremely accurate, obviously, but it makes kind of like a axe head shape kind of, and then goes in, and then from there I take this line that goes downward. It also starting to look like a little bit of a small dog's head.
Yeah, it's like a scruffy dog right now.
Yeah, and it goes down into I call it a belly. It makes a funny belly, and then kind of narrows in the back a little bit. And it comes back up into this kind of square shape. And then from the square shape, it connects from the nub there. And then I'm including Treaty 8 as well, since that's where my hometown is. And it kind of starts down in front of the nose and behind the ear. And then it wiggles up all the way around there. And then it kind of has this really straight line. And then it kind of wiggles all the way back down into another straight line that continues. And then from that corner, it wiggles all the way back down and ends up following the Rocky Mountains that the Alberta border ends up following as well. So that's just like, this is Treaty 6, this one is Treaty 8. And then Alberta, if you want to situate it within the Alberta borders, I kind of cut, I call this a dog, I cut the dog in half and go straight up and stop about there where I can connect the top border of Alberta. And then I also cut this kind of section part way. And then this is the Rocky Mountains, and then it comes all the way back down. And I keep calling this a stump, but to the stump of Alberta. So I don't know if that makes you sad if you live there, but I still like it. But so this is kind of how it's situated. And then if you want to know where Edmonton is, it's kind of like where the eye of the dog would be. And then my hometown, this would be like Slave Lake. And then my hometown, my little tiny hamlet is about like right there. So
you're kind of just like on the border.
Yeah, it's really, really close. Actually, I think like part of the lake, at least in the maps that I was looking at, like touches the border basically. Yeah, so yeah, that's my kind of quick drawing of the treaties. Treaty 6 and 8 at least.
That's really great. Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, so we're here talking, or kind of in celebration of the opening of the Ghosts of the Mink Make a Big Spirit. So this is a huge mural. One of the first things that you see actually when you come to the gallery, and it's visible like right from the entrance, and so you don't even have to pay admission to come see it. And we are open now 3 days a week, and so everybody can come and have a look at the project that you've done. So the actual image itself is this kind of rolling, billowing, tumbling cloud. And out of this black, gray, brown form emerges legs, tails, heads, different parts of an animal. And this image, as with most of your projects, is related to growing up in Canyon Creek, which is your tiny town on the border there that you've just drawn for us, which is on the southern shore of Lesser Slave Lake. And I think the initial seed of this idea came from smoke. So I wonder if you would show us how you draw smoke.
Yeah, for sure. Here, I'll grab a new paper. So the way I draw smoke, it's pretty simple and cartoony, so I think that helps. And I know smoke can be like a little bit of a funny thing to try to draw. So I guess the way I draw smoke is I start making these like clouds, these like shapes, and I end up calling them like blomps all the time.
What do you call them?
Like blomps, I don't know. All the ways I realize I describe how I draw like don't actually make a ton of reasonable sense. But so I start drawing these like cloud shapes, and they don't all necessarily like connect really like well. They kind of like cut into each other, and then some of them show more of like a roundness, and some of them are only like half. And I kind of go like that, and then if we continue to like make this drawing, this like cloud shape come from somewhere, it ends up almost looking like soft serve ice cream or something. Yeah. And I don't know, I'll put this to a point like as if it's coming from like a fire or something. I'll just draw like a little fire down here. Yeah, so this is like a general shape. You can like, even though you've drawn these borders, you can always add like more cloud shapes around it to expand it. So after I do that, I guess I add more of these like blompy circles kind of randomly, and they can like vary in size. And it ends up making this like weird kind of cartoony shape. And then from there, I think what really makes something look like smoke, I use the little like hair lines all the time, but I think those actually kind of give it a lot of like movement and direction. So a good way to start, how I always start and how I figured this out, is I just follow the shape of one of these round parts with a fine line pen, and I just make all these little lines. And I feel like smoke is definitely something where you don't really have to worry about if you like make a mistake, because there's not really a proper way to draw smoke. So if we're following that, you can change it up, and we can add more round shapes within by just like making it up with these lines, if that makes any sense. So like we'll just like form another circle here and then follow it with all the other lines. You kind of like make new lines with all these tiny little lines, like as if it's like a bunch of like where to cut lines when you make a craft. And then these can kind of follow into another blompy circle and kind of follow that. And then you can take this like S shape, and you can take kind of a random area and just make lines that start coming out of there and kind of end up following another shape. But the thing about this too is you don't have to necessarily follow each like circle, each blomp. You don't have to follow it. You can take the lines and go straight, head into like another like blomp so that it runs into the border. And I feel like if you make the lines that hit the border, it kind of ends up making the circle feel like it's kind of turning. So, but if you like put the lines and they didn't touch the border, it would look way more flat. So I guess that's kind of a difference. I think the most important part about these lines is that you just keep them in a rounded shape no matter what you do. As soon as you like let them go flat, your drawing's gonna like stop moving or stop looking rounded. And you also don't have to fill the whole shape with these lines too, because I can like kind of taper them off by putting them further away. I'll show you with this kind of area here. I'll just put a few there and then further away a little less and then a little less. And it kind of ends up making this round shape. And then as you go, I think it guides your like itself. You can kind of decide where you want to like continue the shapes. Like this is going this way, so maybe I'll continue this like turn and I can make it even sharper and make a small circle there like that, and then just follow that. And maybe I'll have this one taper off. Yeah, and you can also kind of treat these little lines as if they're shadows or like shading too. So I guess an example would be at the edge of this blomp, I would put some here that kind of follow it, but then taper off kind of soon so that it kind of just kind of blends into those ones, but looks like a shadow. And then you can kind of do that not even within the rounded part. You can put the lines underneath a blomp shape, and then it becomes a shadow as well. And then if you don't put any lines in this area and you just kind of have lines that kind of taper into it, having somewhere that has no lines also makes a highlight if you have a bunch of lines underneath it.
Yeah, one of the things that I find really interesting about the piece that you have in Manning Hall right now is that, I mean, I described it as a mural, but you didn't create it large. Like it's not painted like directly on the wall or anything. It was drawn fairly small in comparison and then blown up huge. And so I think it's really cool to be able to see the very fine detail in, like, you know, you'll get like a little brush mark that's actually like been, you know, scaled up to like a foot.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because like how I'm drawing this now is about the size, obviously on a really big piece of paper, but all these lines are about the size that they originally were, and these circles are about the size that they originally were. And yeah, it's just really it's at first I was like a little nervous. I was like, I wonder how this will look so much bigger, because what I'm doing as fine detail now is going to be so big. So I was like, I wonder if that'll translate really well. But I think it does. Like, I think it does make a really interesting thing. And also just like the way like a giant paint stroke does kind of look like, or like can be similar to smoke. You think about it. So I think it turned out working out really well, going from such a small drawing to so big.
And so when we were talking about smoke in this project, you were sharing a little bit of this like idea of smoke as something that is inviting and sort of a signifier of socializing, but it's also a signifier of disaster. So could you share a little bit about that kind of dual quality of the smoke?
Yeah. So yeah, like I think like most people, the idea of like the smell of like campfire smoke and seeing smoke, like not a huge cloud, but like a reasonable kind of smoke, kind of, you know that it's probably somebody's campfire. And if you lived somewhere similar, like where I do, where everybody kind of knows each other, that's like almost an invitation to come over. And yeah, I grew up somewhere where my parents always put like fires, like have a fire, and then friends just kind of show up. They just see it and then they come over and they hang out with my parents. So yeah, it's definitely familiar and comforting. And then even the way I grew up, we heated our house with a wood stove because our trailer didn't have any heat. So like smoke in that sense was a really comforting smell, because our house would always smell like smoke. But then when it was the Slave Lake fire, I was actually at this campsite, and I ended up getting stranded there because my auntie and uncle who could drive went and picked up supplies, and then ended up getting cut off and couldn't come back. And then the campsite got evacuated, but we didn't have the radio anymore. I don't know how they knew it was evacuated because the radio burnt down.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I was stuck there with my grandma and grandpa and my little cousin. And then all of the smoke, like, you know how it gets here in the summer when it gets like smoky, it's like very yellow and all that stuff. It was like that, but like really intense. Like I could feel like walking through the smoke, and of course it like stains your skin and your hair. And later it ended up being fine, but when we went to like wash our faces before bed, when we finally like ended up getting out of there, the like white face cloths were yellow, and then of course we're stained with this like weird smoke smell, which is like kind of similar but different to when you're around a campfire. You get like stained with like a smoke smell that smells nice, and it's like it might be in your hair for days, and it's kind of like a nice memory of like when you're with your friends. But yeah, smoke can totally, like when I was running through it, it can like make it hard to breathe and choke you. Even when you're around a campfire, it can get in your eyes and make you like tear up and like your eyes cry a whole bunch. It can do all these different things to you, even if it's like a nostalgic, like comforting kind of thing that's like friendly. So yeah, I kind of ended up relating or using smoke as a metaphor for like grieving, because even when you're like grieving somebody and it's a really comforting feeling, it can still kind of like get to you in a different kind of emotional way. And then grief and smoke can go like from small, from a candle, to like really big and like take up a whole town or whole area. So I think like grief kind of is in people's lives, at least for me, like that, where it can be like something small and it can grow into something bigger, and it's kind of like unpredictable too sometimes.
Yeah, it just like flows wherever it wants to.
Yeah, and there's like certain things like wind that will make it like so much bigger. Like that's the reason why the like fire got so big, was because of the wind. Yeah, I just found it was like a really great metaphor for like grief and all that kind of stuff.
So in the project here, within that smoke, you have images of mink.
Yeah.
Did you want to draw mink for us?
Yeah, for sure. I'll stop with this smoke. I feel like I could go on forever and ever. I'll put it to the side here because maybe I'll like pick it up again if I feel like it. Yeah, so mink, basically, I draw mink kind of like a dog, but I give it a really long body. So sometimes when I draw mink, if I draw the body too short, it's a dog. So I always start, I think, with the ears, I've noticed. So they're just two little lumps.
Why do you think that is? That
I don't know.
Ears?
I'm not really sure. I think even when I draw faces, I start with an odd spot, which is like the mouth. I usually start with the eyes, so I'm not really sure why I start with the ears. Maybe I'll have to like really think about it as I'm drawing more. Yeah, and then I draw the snout, and I'm really bad for accidentally making all my animals' snouts look like pigs. So I'm going to really try to not make it look like a pig. So I kind of give it a little nose, and I leave the mouth open lots of the time. And then, let's see, I kind of bring this down, and he's like a tube neck. I don't think their necks should be thinner than their heads. So then after that, I get about that far, and I figure out where I want to put the arms. And because it's like a long animal, it kind of doesn't matter like if you put the arms way too low or like anywhere. So it's kind of like nice and freeing. And I kind of give them long arms, and then I do 3 little notches for a paw. And I have it go up, and then I kind of connect that together and throw the other arm in there.
And they're like long and skinny, kind of like a ferret.
Yeah, I kind of draw like mink, weasels, ferrets, like they're all kind of like really similar. I think what makes them a mink is just that I call them a mink. So then from there, like you could like make a short body. You can kind of turn this into lots of different kinds of animals, but I kind of just try to make the body like really long, and I'm going to go extreme so I don't accidentally just draw a dog or something. But then I follow this line. Ooh, he's got a funny,
extreme.
he's got like a funny stomach, but that's okay. And then from there, I'm gonna like turn this down because that's the end of his body. I'm gonna draw. My favorite part is to draw their like back legs. So you just kind of make another blomp like in the cloud, and then you've got this like end of the body that you can kind of like go straight down or like cut it off so it doesn't make a perfect circle. And whoop. Then this is like the hard part. It took me like a little while to figure out. Sometimes I still get confused about back legs, but you kind of make this weird like chicken leg shape, but instead of it going straight out to a foot, you have to give it like another turn. And then that becomes a paw. And then let's see, this guy's shaped real funny, but that's okay. And then I just kind of like shadow that. And then that leg's a little small, but if I colored in black to be a shadow, like that side of the leg is really dark for some reason, then you can totally like adjust it and make it work for you. I'm gonna make the foot a little longer.
Oh, shading to correct it.
Yeah, I use that all the time. I think one thing, when people can't draw, they think if they make a mistake, it's over, but you can totally just like correct it and everybody will believe you, no matter what.
Oh, that's helping a lot.
And then I'm gonna give him a tail. It's a long tail. Well, it's not long. I usually draw them really short, and I don't know why. And then I usually do a little line by the mouth. I think it's just like something I prefer, and I give them eyebrows all the time. And then from there, this drawing's like really weird, but I think it's fine. From there, I use my like fine liner pen, and where I put the hairs would be, I always put hairs underneath my eyes. And if there's room, I put them over top as well. And then I always put lines, like little hair lines going from the nose, and they end up connecting with the eye. And then I might put some behind the mouth as well. And then just to like differentiate the head and give it some like roundness, I kind of put the lines like kind of like a cheek in a round shape like that, just so he has like a little bit of form. And you can fill this whole thing with lines and like kind of follow the body how you think it should go. Or you can use the lines like shading and put lines just on like the edges of where the arms and like bodies are, where it could be shadow, and throw a bit elsewhere so it doesn't just look like shading, it looks like his hairs. I do this on the legs, on this nice like thick part of his leg. And I always do that on their like rumps as well. This like lower part, I don't know what it is, but I really love drawing them. I love like the round shapes, and you can make their legs really giant. I don't know why I like it so much. But yeah, so I kind of like follow, if I'm going to do like the hair directions going like up to down, I'll follow that same method throughout the rest of like his form. But sometimes I go the opposite and I just follow that same direction through the rest of his form. And I don't think it really makes much of a difference to like how your drawing looks. It's just kind of like ends up which direction you ended up wanting to go.
And why a mink?
Oh, I chose a mink because in my hometown there was mink farms, and I was always aware of it even really before I knew what that meant. Because there's all these cages in like by the beach, mink cages, and sorry, I just have a runny nose. There's all these mink cages by the beach, and I'd always walk by them. And then just kind of as you get older, you kind of learn more. And there used to be mink farms in my hometown. Which is really interesting. So like they'd farm mink, and then the fur would be sold to make fur coats. And every kind of person that grew up at that time have stories about it. My grandparents would talk about it. My art teacher had the tip of her finger bit off by a mink when she was younger, all this different stuff. And then recently I found out that my grandma actually like worked like with the mink farming. She like prepped the skin. She didn't skin them, she prepped it before they went out. And yeah, she just told me that they worked in a little shack, and there was 2 of them, and it was like a seasonal job. And my mom, the reason I found out is because my mom kind of randomly was like, oh, I remember when grandma used to like do the mink skins. She'd come home and it'd be so stinky, like, because they stunk. But then my grandma told me that like, and my mom told me like, but the oils from the skin would like really soften up her hands. She'd have like the softest hands for that season. And it was run by this guy who's like kind of fishy. Like he's never done or said anything like extremely bad in the community, but like he like had this huge business in Canyon Creek and ran all the mink farms, and he owned multiple little houses. And yeah, he's just kind of like this mysterious like figure that when I was little, he would wander around the area and go for walks with his dogs. But I always felt like nobody really knew much about him. So he's a little bit like mysterious and scary also.
There's also this like mystery that kind of goes along with the mink in your memory.
Yeah, for sure.
And so in the project that you have here, this like form that the mink are in, it is smoke, but it's also, you describe as a spirit. And you did mention that you kind of have this relationship between smoke and grieving. And so there's kind of this idea of absence in the smoke. And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about this kind of duality between smoke and spirit or ghosts in this project.
Yeah. So because of the mink farm, there's obviously so many minks that like died. There's so many cages. So I kind of thought I was working with smoke for a couple months before I decided to make this, and I made the smoke into this like spirit, but it didn't really have like a much to it. And then when I was learning about my family's involvement in the mink farming, I kind of put together this idea that the like smoke could be made up of all these like ghosts of mink that like died in the mink farming. And it's not like mink within smoke, like the whole idea of like the body of smoke would be made up of all these mink, and the mink can like grow and shrink. And you know, the way they move their bodies is like wiggly, like smoke and all this stuff. So yeah, and then the idea of spirits is like I have that whole mythology of my characters, and the spirit kind of exists in their world. I end up making like lots of lore and tales about that surround my hometown, or like are about my hometown, and make like a copy of my hometown that isn't real. So they exist in that kind of world that I've made. And I'm trying to like gather my thoughts now. The smoke is made up of all the mink, which are ghosts. So like, and the smoke is a metaphor for grieving. And when it's made up of ghosts, I think that just kind of like it just kind of came together and made sense. I'm not sure if I answered your question perfectly, but let me know if I
answer. Halie, I think that we maybe just have time for maybe one more quick drawing.
Sure.
The time has just flown by. So was there, we had planned for a few more drawings, but was there one that you were particularly interested in drawing for us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess everybody usually likes Lunette a lot, so maybe I'll draw Lunette. But if you have questions that are like more to do with any other part that's not specifically Lunette, just let me know, and I can like probably draw a quick sketch of the character or whoever you're talking about.
No, you go ahead and draw Lunette. But while you're drawing, maybe did you want to expand a little bit more on the kind of notions of like duality or like hybridity? Like I feel like in most of your work, in most of your characters, and in the project downstairs, there is always this kind of double play, whether it's like dual meaning of things like the smoke mixed with ghosts, whether it's smoke as danger, but also something that's like inviting. Your characters are oftentimes hybrids of like human animal, or there may be like doppelgangers of people in real life or characters in real life. So did you want to maybe kind of expand on that kind of idea a bit?
Yeah, I can try to do that. I feel like it's a little bit like complicated for myself as well to like fully figure out, because I feel like that like duality thing is so present in my work that I'm still trying to like figure out it exactly. But yeah, all my characters are like combos of like people and animals. I think I ended up making them like that because I like drawing people, but I don't really like using them as like in my art, because they can like reference to somebody like too specific. I feel like I didn't want anything like really specific being in there. But they are influenced by the people that I grew up with and my family friends. I have one, like maybe I won't say because I don't want people to find out why I named this one character, but because it's a little embarrassing.
Don't share all your secrets.
I have like a character that I ended up making after like one of my parents' friends, and yeah, just kind of inspired by like their attitude and like the way their life kind of ends up going. And yeah, so they're all different versions of my hometown, and I make like my hometown as like a copy of I make my mythology as a copy of my hometown. And I think a lot of that has to do with the idea of ghosts being a kind of a type of, I don't know what the word is. Like, it is almost like a a copy of, or a different version of a person or an animal or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like very heavily inspired by the idea of like having a afterlife, or having a I don't know, yeah, like an afterlife or some other place where you go. But yeah, I'm still like exploring that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the other points that you were talking about? I feel like I've like lost.
No, I like dropped like a very vague question on you, so that was my fault. Yeah, I think it's like interesting that it's maybe like developing your kind of experience of loss or death, and sort of maybe kind of like reckoning with like those huge questions of life, as like, you know, what's kind of beyond this, or sort of outside of our understanding, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm trying to understand where all that like information goes that the person kind of takes with them and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also like making another version of, I don't know, a place that I'm really familiar with and my whole family's familiar with, and kind of adding like a lore to it, that because all hometowns have like funny stories, and lots of them are like unbelievable even though they're real, which I'm really interested in. But yeah, I guess kind of also creating another version where like I actually know everything, because yeah, I feel like I want to understand my hometown more than I do, but I don't know if that's ever like possible, because I can't live the same like life experiences as my like grandparents did, or my parents, because we all came from the same hometown. So I'm kind of like, I'm trying to understand all that kind of information of this funny place.
Yeah, I think there's also something of like kind of grappling with your relationship to a place that you have in childhood.
Yeah.
And like, I come from a small town too, and so like you kind of understand this like weird lore as you kind of describe it, that happens in these small towns, like these stories that are like absolutely unbelievable but are absolutely true. And I think also those moments of like thinking back on your childhood and having those weird memories where you're like, oh yes, this thing just seemed completely reasonable. To like think back on it like as an adult, you kind of really get an understanding of like the weirdness of it, perhaps.
Yeah, and I guess I'm making it even weirder when I like make my own version. And I definitely totally understand and got that feeling when I moved away to the city, and then I would tell people about how I grew up, and it was just kind of like totally not normal.
Yeah.
Totally not the average way of people growing up. But yeah, that kind of strangeness to it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll get Liz to come back and see if there's any questions from the audience, if she's been monitoring it. Hi, Liz.
Hi. I don't see any questions here, but if anyone has anything in mind, just want to type it in quickly, we can try and get to one or two.
And sorry, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
If we're waiting for questions, I'll just like talk about maybe Lunette, since I'm drawing her quickly.
Yeah, of course.
If there's a question, you can interrupt me. But I guess Lunette is one of my characters from like this like group of characters that are all like friends and live together in an ice shack. that moves on its own every season. And Lunette is this like, she's kind of the last member to join. So when we are with the other members, they're all together already and we don't know how they found each other, but Lunette is the one that kind of kicks off the story. And she's a ghost from this like deep forest, and she's been dead for so long that she can't remember like which animal she used to be. And she has kind of like this extra, like, I don't know, like a power to her. Like the other ghosts are just the usual sheep ghosts, but she's like really, like, I don't know what it is, but she's like really magical. And she kind of forces her way into the group, even though they're all really scared of her, and they eventually end up liking her. And yeah, she speaks, like, nobody understands what she says. She speaks really strangely. I think she speaks kind of like backwards. And yeah, I think I did that because I used to have a stutter when I was growing up. So I also see Lunette a lot like as myself in a weird way. So she's totally modeled after like my own weird, maybe my feeling of like growing up in my hometown, like having a stutter and being like a big weirdo.
So she's like your self-portrait.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think I've ever told anybody that before, which is kind of funny.
Well, thanks for sharing with us now.
No problem. But yeah, I feel like she's everybody's favorite, so that's why I wanted to try to draw her today.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any other questions or anything?
No, I'm just like, I just enjoy watching you draw. It's very captivating.
I'm so glad, because now that I'm drawing, I like can't like stop and like look up at the camera. I just have to like finishing my drawing.
No, it's just really, it's always really, I think, enjoyable to watch somebody who can do something very well. To just kind of like watch the ease with which you draw is really, really great.
Oh, thank you.
So on that, I do have one question from an audience member. What makes a drawing good or great, or is there such a thing as a objectively good or great drawing?
I think that I really love when people who don't normally draw or say they can't draw. I always ask for my friends who can't draw, I want them to like draw me a picture. So I don't think that there's ever like such thing as like, this is a great drawing and this is a bad drawing. Like, I think if you're like trying and you make mistakes, and sometimes the mistakes end up working, and like sometimes like you can cover them up really easily. I really don't think there's such thing as like bad drawing, and I always want everybody to try drawing even if they think they're terrible, because I think also people who make bad drawings, they're making like the best drawings. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's how I feel. I have like a very strong stance. I'm always trying to like, get people to draw for me.
No,
That's a great position.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
Well, I think we're time to wrap up. So thank you, Halie and Lindsey, for that great conversation and demo. I hope everyone has time to come down and see your exhibition in Manning Hall. And of course, thank you again to Capital Power for presenting that installation. So the AGA is currently open on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So open 11 to 5 on Friday and Saturday, and open late 11 to 7 on Thursdays. And we're currently offering pay what you may admission for essential workers and our friends in the arts and culture sector. So I hope you'll all come down and see Halie's work as well as all of our other exhibitions.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.